In this interview, I sat down with Master Sergeant Keller. He runs the Military Training Leaders, or MTL flight. In case you don't know, MTLs are first-line supervisors for airmen getting their technical training. They're the ones who help airmen instill self-discipline, make sure they get their orders on time to their first duty station, help them resolve personal issues, and tons of other responsibilities. Some days it really seems like a thankless job. But, like most of the people in our detachment, our group of MTLs make the job look easy. Since Master Sergeant Keller spends more time than anyone else in the detachment counseling and mentoring airmen, as well as his team of NCOs, I knew there would be no one better to talk to about counseling airmen, especially in a training environment. He brings some very nuanced perspectives to the subject. Definitely listen to this one a couple of times to make sure you get as much out of it as you can. We are recording again. Okay, so let's just start with this then. So this is the NCOPD podcast, not the NCOD podcast. That's a different project altogether. And where we're talking about counseling airmen.
Yes, counseling airmen.
I think that one of the things that I really want your perspective on is, okay, so I'm gonna call myself out here a little bit because we recently had the unit climate assessment survey, and so that's supposed to be an anonymous. What's the word I'm looking for? Well, it's a climate assessment survey,
okay.
But it's a survey and it's supposed to be anonymous about like your opinions and how you're doing and how you feel things are going in the unit and
sure,
all that other kind of thing. And one of the things that I put in there, I'm not shy about saying this at all, because I think that it's something that we face both in the Air Force and in the culture at large.
Right. Okay.
Is that it's really hard to find balance between having to be tough and fair and preparing airmen for like the rigors of daily military life, because it is hard sometimes, but
yeah.
Then also finding that sensitivity, because we're so worried these days about offending people, like and
yeah.
Finding that balance, it's like it seems like a very narrow path that you have.
Well, I tell you, from what I've seen, is that where people typically end up going down the wrong route with counseling and mentoring is that they don't come at it from an objective viewpoint. Typically, what you normally see is that when someone does a counseling or a mentoring, it is right after the fact, right after the incident, and they're still dealing with their emotions running high. You know, they're ticked off at the airman or their subordinate for whatever reason, whatever the infraction was, and so that's how they're coming at that individual. They're coming at them, you know, from an angry standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And with mentoring and counseling, that's really detrimental because you have to look at it that you're not angry at that person, you're angry at their action instead of, you know, the individual themselves. So what I try to do is if I'm angry, you know, about an incident, I try to wait till I've calmed down, or, you know, try to approach it and leave that anger out of it and just kind of go at it in an objective manner. You know, and that usually helps out because typically if you don't and you're coming at it from an angry standpoint, then you're more likely to cross that boundary. You're more likely to, you know, go into a degrading type of approach versus a, hey, let's fix this issue and move on from there. Okay.
So tell me about your background.
Okay. I came into the military in 2001, so I'm at 15 years in now. Loved it. Came in, I'm security forces by trade. You know, so 7.5 years I spent in Panama City at Tyndall Air Force Base, where I worked mostly law enforcement. Did a little bit of security and stuff along the side there as well, but primarily law enforcement. From there, I went to.
So when you say law enforcement mission, was that before they kind of combined? Because remember, it used to be LE and SF.
No, you're right. It was, but that's not the case. There, it was all combined. We were Security forces, we weren't security police, anymore.
Okay.
This was after the change. But at Tyndall, the mission there, it was AETC, so we didn't have a real big security mission there. We had a flight line, but you had 3 restricted areas there, and you had your ramp patrols, and then after that you had gates, your gate guards. We had 3 gates there, but primarily it was a law enforcement mission.
Mm-hmm. So just the cops on post. Well, oh my gosh, cops on base.
Yes,
Sorry,
base.
I've been
I
on
do
post
it too.
too long. Okay, so you did that for 7 years,
7.5.
7.5, and then what happened after that?
So after that, we had in 2009, well,
Yeah.
2008, we had the little incident with, Minot and Barksdale. And so they did that big rank, leveling initiative. And so all the staff sergeants out there were getting sent to the northern tier bases. I was one of them. So went up to Minot for 4.5 years, and I worked on the missile side. So we did missile security there. After 4.5 years of that, I was looking for a change, and so I applied to be a military training leader and was selected. And in 2013, got stationed here.
That sounds like a pretty good career path so far. Like nothing too
Not bad.
Nothing
Not
too
bad.
intense.
I'm going to disagree with you on that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Minot was very intense.
Really?
It is a climate where there is 0 errors. So you really have to be focusing on your game.
Literally and figuratively.
Yes.
Like in February, you don't make errors in Minot, or you're dead.
Right.
And in your job, you don't make errors, or nukes blow up.
Right. Yep.
Maybe exaggerating.
Yeah, slightly on the nuke blowing up part. But
yeah.
But yeah,
But
no,
still,
it's
that's that. Talk about a high profile.
It's a high stress. It is. There's a lot of things that are going on, and very step oriented processes where if you miss a step, it throws everything off.
Right.
So you can't really afford to, not be focused on what you're doing.
And then most of my experience with security forces when I was in the contingency response group at McGuire.
Okay.
And they have that broken up, so it's kind of like a mission support group side by side with an operations group. Mm-hmm. But it's just a squadron. So it's like a cross section of a mission support group shoved into a squadron. So we're heavy on security forces, and you'll have weather and CE and contracting and air traffic control and like just like a cross section of everything that it takes to run an airbase all within one squadron.
Right.
Which means that you're going to be heavy on security forces because that tends to be one of the larger squadrons and busier, highest profile squadrons on an installation.
Sure.
Right. So that was my experience. That was my first real in-depth experience with security forces. I mean, I had some buddies that I drank beer with back in the day and stuff, but that was about it.
Well, we're good at that too.
Yes. I can never quite hang, but one of the things that I learned a lot from the security forces is that they're very, very good at personnel management, team management, and counseling and keeping everything, as the Army says, kind of dress right dress. Mm-hmm. Because you have people with weapons and sometimes issues that have grave responsibilities, making sure that nuclear weapons are safe, or making sure that Air Force One is safe, or making sure that nobody's coming in through the gate. And so you have to be able to be fair and strict, and that was I was always really impressed with how well they were able to manage their people and keep things on the straight and narrow. But I started to cut you off, but at the same time they had a lot of problem, like we were talking about earlier, where Colonel Hostler wants to do away with profanity and bring up more professionalism.
Sure.
It seems like the security forces, they had rich language. Is that more than others?
I'm going to say that comes from a culture.
Right.
It's like any of the other cultures out there, like AMXS. I'm sure probably is very similar.
Yeah.
Some of the other CE background career fields.
Well, I started out on the flight line. I was a
Mm-hmm.
helicopter crew chief,
Sure.
and yeah, and you learn some colorful language, and
Absolutely.
when your first supervisor beats the crap out of you, and that's how you learn that the world is, and then all of a sudden I cross-trained to civil engineering, and I was working in an office in front of a computer, and I could no longer
Right.
yell and scream and rant and rave, and
Yeah, exactly.
you know, it forced me into this different level of professionalism. It was
Sure.
it was a hard transition.
Oh, it is. It is. It definitely is. It
Mhm.
was, the culture hasn't changed much,
Mhm.
right? Coming from, I mean, even now, whenever I left in the career field in 2013, it was pretty much the same.
Mhm.
Vulgar language was pretty much a typical thing that you would hear
Right.
within a flight.
Right.
You get to a position like this, an MTL, where you're interacting with some of the newest members of the service,
Mhm.
and that's something that you can't do.
Right.
So it just takes a little bit of self control, to recognize that that kind of behavior is not going to be acceptable in this type of environment,
Mhm.
and so you just have to be able to turn it off.
That's hard.
It is.
It's hard. It's
Sure.
doable. I mean, I've done it.
Yeah.
I'm not dropping f-bombs right now,
Right.
so obviously it's possible.
Yeah, and it's just you have to know yourself, know what your
Mhm.
triggers are, and if you're at that stage where you can't communicate without swearing or profanity, then take that second to walk away.
Yeah. Yeah. Which goes back to what you were saying earlier, that's not the time to identify a teachable moment.
Right.
Because you can't do mentoring with lots of swearing in the middle of it.
No.
You know?
Absolutely.
Now I've noticed. So you're a dad. You've got 2 kids, right?
I do.
And I've noticed I've got a wicked temper. Like
Oh.
I've known this about myself for years and years and years. I've got a horrible temper.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm at a place where I can turn it on and turn it off. So I can finally use it to my advantage,
Sure.
which is it's an interesting skill to have. But I use it with my kids
Mhm.
because I can just kind of like show them like, hey, daddy's nice and daddy's cool and daddy's fair and these are the rules and everything's like calm and peaceful and great. But every once in a while, I just show them like my angry eyes or I'll have like I'll deliberately completely come unglued, but not on them, but on something else,
Right.
like a political or just something ridiculous that happens, and I'll allow myself to have that kind of burst,
Mm-hmm.
so they see that daddy's capable of this burst.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if
Yeah.
this is like the best method of parenting,
Well, I
but
think
then
everybody,
yeah.
has.
But then
at
when
some
I
point.
look at them and then I give them like that little bit of angry eyes, they're like, "Ooh, I don't want to," So they never experience that.
Yep.
They never experience my children will never. Well, my oldest daughter might disagree because I wasn't good at it when I was younger, but they'll never hear me ranting and raving, screaming and getting in their face about anything. I refuse to do that.
Right.
But they know that I'm capable of doing that.
Well, sure. Yeah. It's kind of like it's a warning.
Yeah.
It sets the limit.
Right.
It lets them know whenever you. Because I do it with my kids too.
Mhm.
I'll give them the eyes that says you're about to cross the line, and I'm going
Right.
to unleash.
Right.
I mean, in a safe parenting type of way of unleash,
Of
but
course, yeah.
but yeah, you're telling them, hey, your behavior or whatever it is
Mhm.
is starting to cross that line, and you've reached that boundary now.
So, but we can't really do that here in AETC with pipeline students.
No, not in that sense. It's a little bit different.
It seems like that's the job of the TIs.
Right.
Like let those guys at Lackland, the instructors at Lackland, do the yelling and screaming and ranting and raving and kind of get everything in line, and then we have to kind of ride off of what they did.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It's a continuation of the process.
Mm-hmm.
BMT is designed to break them down and get rid of all those civilian habits
Mm-hmm.
and start to build them up into the airmen that we want. The ones that pay attention to detail, that follow direction, have some dedication to what they're supposed to be doing, and start buying into those core values. For them to do that, that takes a very structured environment. Now, when they come to us, we are starting at that point to continue to build those processes that they start at BMT, but we have to start transitioning them out of that highly structured environment, because whenever they get to their first unit and their first duty station, they're not going to have that MTI that's waking them up at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. They're going to be expected to have those standards already set up to where they know, hey, if I got to be here at 5 a.m., well, I need to get up at 4 a.m. to give myself time to get ready.
Right.
And not be reliant on somebody else to do that for them. So start giving them back some of that control.
Right. In the past, I've compared it to a pressure cooker. And if you release the pressure on a pressure cooker too fast,
sure,
it's gonna explode.
Oh, yeah.
So you gotta release that steam slowly. But then, whatever you had in the pressure cooker, it has changed.
Yeah.
It went from, I don't know, whatever you cook in a pressure cooker to something else, soft and pliable and useful now that wasn't useful before.
Right.
Exactly. So
that's a pretty good comparison.
Yeah. And I try to explain that to the airmen sometimes too. So one of the cool thing about my job is I'm not an instructor and I'm not an MTL. So I get to kind of be the cool uncle. So I don't supervise anybody. I don't have any responsibilities. I can just go and say whatever I want. Then you guys have to deal with the repercussions. Right?
Thank you.
So, but hopefully it's helpful. But whenever we get a new group of airmen that come in, I've got like my standard spiel that I go through.
Yeah.
Probably ask a lot of them around and ask them about what Sergeant Helgerson says about the 3 most important things to never do in life, and which is like never do anything illegal, immoral, or incredibly stupid. And I've got this whole story that I tell of why that's important, and then I give them a spiel about wingmanship, and then I talk about why the difference between our Air Force core values, our first one is integrity first, whereas in the Army, integrity is number 7.
Yeah.
And I talk about why that's important, and how that's, maybe even one of the reasons why we broke away from the Army, because we had like a different set of standards and we have a different job. Whereas in the Army, the first one is loyalty, because I need to make sure that wherever I am, the guy next to me has got a gun and he's a little bit nuts because he's been shooting people or whatever has been going on. So I need to make sure that I'm more concerned about my fellow soldier being loyal than I am about his integrity. Which, and I'm sure that any soldier out there would say, no, you're insane, don't ever say that out loud. Because integrity obviously has to be, it's in the mix.
Yeah.
But it's not as front and center as we have it.
Right.
But so those are some of my little spiels, that I give to the airmen. Like, hey, think about this, think about what you're doing. But I tell them about the pressure cooker thing. And I wonder if that wouldn't be, I tend to obviously give too much information sometimes, but I'm at that liberty because I'm the cool uncle,
Sure.
But if that wouldn't be like a good thing to explain to them too, and say, hey, this is why you're going through what you're going through. Yeah. These aren't just insane people who hate you.
Sure. I mean, it's, you're always going to have those individuals out there who look at a standard and look at a rule and say, well, that's just stupid.
Right.
Why do I have to do it this way? Why do I have to do it at this particular time? And a lot of times they're not getting the concept accurately. They're focusing on the wrong thing. It's not actually the act itself, it's that you do it in the time frame or in the manner in which we tell you to do it, because that shows that you can follow direction. At your stage in your life and your career, it's not up to you to make those determinations on your own. Right. We're just looking for you to be able to follow the instructions that are given to you. And by demonstrating that, you're proving to us that you have that capability and you're ready to go on. Right. Yeah. I mean, the standard, like I said, I mean, it may kind of be this just kind of, oddball thing. Right. But Whenever
like
you can't follow a simple
like a
instruction of
quarter-inch of ice in the freezer.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Quarter inch of ice, or uh, making sure that your 341's on your pillow.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't follow these simple basic instructions, then how can we trust you to go out into your career field
Mm-hmm.
and follow these instructions and standards that are set out there with less supervision
Mm-hmm.
than if you can't do it here?
Right.
And so that's a concept that we try to get these guys to understand.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the. I'm going to do a whole other podcast on this next thing, but that's the sheepdog concept, and that's another one of my standard lectures. I don't give it every single time, every time we get a new group of airmen, but I kind of save that one. Like if I'm in there talking to a new group of airmen, and they seem like maybe just like in general the group, they're maybe kind of lacking discipline.
Yeah.
Like some of them. Well, you can tell this. You get a new group of airmen, right? And when they talk, they give a reporting statement, or they're nice and polite, and it seems like there's a general mood in that particular one group of people, and it depends on, I'm sure, like where they come from and who their TIs were, and like there's all these different kind of variables in there,
right?
And then you got the groupthink kind of comes into and plays into that.
Yep.
But I'll notice really quickly, like if they get too casual too fast, then I'll give them the sheepdog lecture, you know, and why it's important to, once you've gotten your sheepdog training, you have to maintain your sheepdog training,
Sure.
And like there's one airman here, I think I talked to you about this, I won't mention his name, but he's had some issues with self-discipline and kind of keeping himself in line.
Right.
And I came in one day and he hadn't shaved and his hair looked horrible, and I gave him like the sheepdog lecture. And because my ego is so big, I like to think that helps him. Because when I see him now, I mean, he's still got issues going on, but when I see him now, he looks good.
Yeah.
His hair's better, and his face is clean, and his uniform looks a little bit better. And even if, he doesn't end up having an Air Force career, then he'll take that like out into the rest of the world.
And, it's funny because kind of going back to something that you said, it's like, when you go into a room full of airmen, every one of those guys and gals has a different background and a different story.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be so great if they had a book that said, hey, this is how you mentor.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, that's not the case because everybody is motivated by different things.
Mm-hmm.
So counseling and mentoring are kind of two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
But, with mentoring, it is just such a fluid and dynamic thing because, I can use one approach with one person and it's like hitting a brick wall.
Mm-hmm.
They just, they don't care.
Right.
Because you haven't found what motivates them. So every airman's going to be different. The trick is trying to find what motivates them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it can come from, well, why did you join the military? Why did you join the Air Force? You know, and a lot of times that will play into, well, that's what motivates them to be here because that's why they came here in the first place.
Right. And that's one of the interesting challenges we have here. Excuse me. Here specifically at Fort Leonard Wood, because like the MTLs at Shepherd, I mean, they've got planes flying in the background. They're on an Air Force base. You've got, everybody else is an airman. They're working on planes. It's, the core of what the Air Force is and does is represented in everything that happens there.
Sure.
Whereas here, we kind of gotta wrap in as much Air Force stuff as we can because we're so surrounded by Army mentality and Marine Corps mentality, and which is well and good and all in its own ways. But so when you were talking about mentoring and talking to people on an individual basis, one of the lessons I learned as I was a brand new tech sergeant, and I had a couple of airmen that they just fought like cats and could not get along. And I tried separating them, putting them in different work areas, and they would find ways to come back together and fight. And one of the airmen, I did not like her at all. Like on a personal level, I did not like her. Yeah. So I had to find some way to kind of get around myself.
Yeah.
And find a way to get her where she needed to go. And actually, it it was her. I was having a counseling session with her, and so I'm in the middle of trying to put past the side that I just do not like this human being that's in front of me,
Right.
very much,
Yep.
and just be, honest and direct and fair. But she was the person who said to me that people who come from like nice, well-rounded families and healthy economic backgrounds, and that from nice neighborhoods, and stable home environments and all that kind of stuff, don't enlist in the military. Those kinds of people, by and large, go to college or they stay close to home and they do that kind of. But her point was that we all, whether you're in the Air Force or the Army or whatever, we all come from a similar background. Like if you told me stories about your childhood, I could probably totally identify with stories from my childhood, because I grew up broke in the sticks in New Hampshire, literally living in a cellar hole for a while, wondering if there was going to be milk in the fridge tomorrow because dad got laid off, or there was these kind of issues.
Okay.
And there was family instability. So one of the reasons why I joined the military is because I was looking for some kind of family stability. There was that part of my psyche that hadn't been developed.
Yeah.
And it's provided it. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time because it does provide that kind of stability for me.
Right.
And once that kind of registered with me, is I was suddenly able to understand her point of view better.
Yeah.
Because suddenly she wasn't just an adversarial airman, she was literally family, because she came from someplace that I got, and I was able to connect with her in a different way. And from that day, from the time she said that to me, from that day on, her behavior changed, her the way that she interacted with other airmen changed, and things improved. She was still kind of annoying, but I mean, her personality didn't change, but the way that we all interacted with each other changed.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when you are able to develop that connection, and because whenever you have that connection and you have that genuine, where now this airman believes that you actually care. Right. Yeah, you have that connection, right? It just lends credibility to the stuff that you're saying, because as a supervisor, I can go through the spiel of, I want you to be successful, and you need to, I want you to be happy or whatever. But if the airman doesn't believe I genuinely actually do care and want them to be happy and successful and everything, then they're just going to blow everything off that you say. It's important to try to find that connection. And I think one thing that's really great is whenever you're in a smaller unit, you can have that, that kind of a little bit closer relationship with your subordinates. I've seen, in the smaller shops, where typically smaller shops get along a lot better than, bigger shops. Yeah. Because you have that closer connection with, your coworkers and everything. Whereas coming from security forces background, where you have flights of 60 plus personnel, you don't know everybody on that type of level. Right. And, as supervisor, at one point I remember I had 5, individuals that I supervised myself, and you couldn't really have that because you just don't have the time to develop that kind of personal relationship and connection with those people. So that does hinder. I wish we had a little bit better balance across the Air Force of, having maybe 2 or 3 subordinates to every supervisor, but it's just not possible. No. And then, here especially, I can see that's where, as an MTL, we're supposed to be the first line supervisors for these airmen. But when you have 270 something airmen and 6 MTLs to spread across, those 270 something, you can't have that kind of personal relationship.
Is that one of the expectations of MTLs, that you'll be
to be a first line supervisor? Yeah. Oh yes.
Wow. Yep. That's hard to imagine. Yeah. I mean, I know that's got to be in writing, but it seems more like just crowd management a lot of the time.
Unfortunately, that's the way it is for the majority of the airmen. Mm-hmm. There's always that, you'll spend 80% of your time on, 20% of the airmen. And that really is the case. But those are the ones, unfortunately, that's usually on a negative, interaction. Right. Or they're dealing with some sort of, issue. So you have that. interaction, and you can develop that little bit of a personal relationship. But for 80% of the airmen, it's more just fly on the wall. They do what they need to do. There's not a whole lot of interaction.
Right.
It kind of hampers that ability to mentor, because you really don't get to know that person.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough.
Yeah. What kind of stuff would you want to tell a brand new P&E instructor dealing with airmen?
Well, that's a good question. First off, I think number one is that I would have to say you have to be genuine. You can't, just look at these individuals as just another number to go through, just another class.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to get that buy-in and the motivation that you expect, then you're going to have to to break down that instructor-student kind of barrier a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
With the rule sets that we have, it's really tough. You kind of got to toe that line a little bit as far as developing those personal relationships with the students. But I think in order to really get that buy-in, you really have to do that, because otherwise you're not going to be genuine. The students aren't going to feel like you actually care and will come to you, with any issues or, with questions or whatever. So I'd say number one is try to break down that wall.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I'd probably focus on, the addressing the incident. Whenever you have somebody who's not performing the standard, is don't rush to judgment. Take that objective approach.
Mm-hmm.
And look at, well, why are they not meeting the standards?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, I think people just automatically jump to, well, they don't care, or they're just a piece of crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
But until you really kind of sit down and talk with them and find out what's going on, a lot of times you're going to find out, well, there's stuff that's going on back home, or, there's some sort of stressor in their life that, is maybe distracting them, or it could even not be a disciplinary thing at all, and more along the lines of they just never developed, those steady habits.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a lot of that, recently in the academic side of things, where they were basically kind of hand-fed everything through high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get here, and then that's not the case.
Yeah.
We don't just hand you a diploma. You have to earn it. But back in high school, if they didn't do very well on a test, then, they would read the test to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, maybe if I help the student develop a better, steady plan,
mm-hmm.
Then they can be successful that way.
Mm-hmm. So the other half of that question then is, so let's say Staff Sergeant Happelblatt got promoted, and now he's a technical sergeant, and he's been here, so it's supposed to be a 4-year controlled tour, but he got involuntarily extended.
Right.
And you and I both know that, well, when I first got here, I was all like shiny and lofty ideas, and I
Sure.
loved the airmen. It was great, and I saw their energy, and was very excited about it. But now, even being the cool uncle, where I don't have to deal with this stuff all the time, I just see this like sea of different skin tones, and maybe some boy ones and some girl ones, but it's just like kind of like blob of airmen running through.
Right.
And there's like maybe like every once in a while a face will pop up that made an impression, or they had a discipline issue, or I got to mention them or something like that. But you can kind of get, I don't know if jaded is the word, because I don't feel jaded. I feel like bored or tired,
burnt out,
or like, yeah, you say the same thing like
Sure.
all the time. Like, dude, you're supposed to have a 341. Why? And it's easy to forget that this is a brand new experience for this particular individual.
Yeah.
For them, it's brand new.
Right.
For you, it's old hat, but for them, it's brand.
Yes.
So with that picture,
Mm-hmm.
what conversation would you have with involuntarily extended Technical Sergeant Happelblatt?
Well, I would try to just talk to them about those core values.
Mm-hmm.
This is your job.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you've already been at this for 4 years and now you're going back for another year, you still need to have that pride in your work. I always, put it this way, and this is something I actually took from a old flight chief of mine. He told me, it's like, look, he's like, you're the one who has to live with yourself at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go home at night and lay down and you're going to bed, can you honestly ask yourself, am I okay with everything that I did?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can say yes, then, well, you did everything to the best of your ability. Right? And so, yes, you may be burnt out, and you're just tired from seeing the same situations over and over and over again. But, you can't stop addressing it the same as you did before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with it, is that for you, yes, this is, after 4 years of addressing the same problems
Mm-hmm.
over and over again, you're like, why can't they get it?
Right.
But this is your 4.5 year,
Right.
and this is that airman's first week,
Right.
at tech training.
Right.
So yeah, this is a repetitive game.
It almost seems like we need to find a better way of, this kind of answers my earlier question of like, where do you find the balance between toughness and sensitivity?
I think the balance whenever it comes to being tough and
Mm-hmm.
sensitive is,
Yeah.
you have to look at the whole picture and
Right.
decide the appropriate response, right?
Yeah. I think what I started to get at was finding an efficient way for ourselves. Like once we find this balance within us, is to remember that that has to be the first thought, is that this is a brand new airman, and this is the professional mold that I'm showing them, and they're coming in, I'm molding them, and then they're moving out, and it's a brand new one, like, every single time.
Sure, absolutely. And the way I do it is I kind of try to develop a process that I go through.
Process, yeah.
Yeah. And so that way, no matter kind of what the situation is, I kind of run through the same process.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is I look at the airmen, right? How long have they been here? What's their experience?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I have to take that into consideration. Number two, I ask, was this willful? Did they, do this with the willful intent of violating the standard? Or was this an ignorance of the standard and they made a mistake? Right? Because one's willful, one's an accident,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now I have to take that into, consideration. And then I like to ask myself, well, did this violate a law?
Mm.
So, is this something that is court-martialable?
Mm-hmm.
Or did it, violate a state law? Or was it an infraction of the standards?
Mm.
And so, I kind of tailor my response to those.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just something that kind of keeps me on track,
Mm-hmm. So another question that one of the things that I run into a lot, and I don't have as much practice with it, is every once in a while I'll come across an airman that I really like this airman.
Sure.
They remind me of my son, or they're just like my brother was at that age, or they're just really smart, or they're capable, or they're there's just something about that particular airman, and you're just kind of like drawn to that person, not in like a weird creepy way.
No,
but because they literally they can feel like family. Like there's been a couple of airmen that I've seen over the couple of years that they remind me so much of my daughter.
Yeah.
Or and I was like, oh, I just really like this person. And you wanna.
Yep.
You wanna.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's a difficult struggle because you really have to maintain that line and say, okay, yeah, this is great. You're cool, but
whatever, I'll say this, whatever opportunities you're going to offer to that individual, you have to be willing to offer to everyone.
Right.
Regardless of how you feel about that individual. Right. Otherwise, you can get that perception of favoritism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really sticky subject, and it's tricky, and it's an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah.
Because I've had airmen that I've really liked.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have loved to have been able to, give them some additional help and stuff. But, when it comes right down to it, I can't put myself in that situation. I can only do what I am allowed to do
Mm-hmm.
and hope for the best,
Right.
I guess, but I have to just remember that, if I'm willing to do this for this person who I think is a good airman
Mm-hmm.
and has a lot of potential, I also have to be willing to do for the one that's I think is unsavable and
Right.
just is a dirtbag, I
Right.
guess,
Well, and not just the one that you think is unsavable, but the one that you just don't click with.
Yeah, too.
Because you can have two airmen side by side, and they're both equally capable human beings. They got their grades are the same. Everything's just
Sure.
they're just on par all the way through. And just for
Yeah.
whatever reason, one of them you're just like, dude,
Yeah.
I like that person.
And it does happen.
Yeah.
It happens with us quite a bit. We see it
Mhm.
with, out of very past requests.
Mhm.
I'll look at an airman and be like, man, I really like that airman.
Mm-hmm.
That airman, there's just something that we have this connection, same background, or,
Right.
maybe their personality is just something that
Right.
I mesh with.
Mhm.
But if they're not meeting those standards,
Right.
then regardless of how you feel, you can't budget either way.
And I just thought of this too. Is when you're back at your regular unit, you have the same situations,
Sure.
but you have years to think about that and find that balance, and to maybe you can say you can kind of be cool, or you can you can find the right way to do that because you've got much more time.
Right.
But here it's just like popcorn running through all the time.
Yes.
And so it's kind of tough to find that balance. But what I find too is that there's this underlying, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a fear, but there's this underlying idea that, like, here's this person that you like and you wish you could connect with, but excuse me, because of AETC rules, I can't for 6 months or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
at a minimum. But there's this kind of anxiety that comes in because you want to be friends and you know that they're going to be gone and you know you're going to lose that.
Mm-hmm.
So at least that's something that I've felt before, and I've
Yeah.
had to make like a deliberate effort. Like there was an airman who came through about a year and a half ago, and he was a little bit older. He was a Native American,
Mm-hmm.
and he ran this nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
And I just like, we had a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting things, and I was actually anxious to have more conversations with him about his heritage and the things that he did, because he was in the Guard and he had a job at a nonprofit, and it all just sounded really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
So I marked it on my calendar. I'm like, okay, he graduates on this day, and on this day I'm gonna be allowed to shoot him an email and kind of touch base.
Yeah.
And say how you doing and whatever. But there was that underlying fear, like, man, I don't want to miss this opportunity.
Yeah. And I mean, there is, so I think some people actually misinterpret that rule.
Yeah.
Because that rule doesn't actually say that you can't have any contact. Okay, you can have professional contact, just not through personal social media,
Right.
or whatever. But
Yeah.
like I've given my work email address to students and said, hey, if you have questions about career development or anything that, promotion, stuff like that, feel free to reach back.
Oh yeah.
And I've had airmen that have reached back and contacted me and said, hey, can you, write me a letter of recommendation because I'm putting in a package for OTS.
Yeah. And I've had I
yeah,
do that with
that's
them all the
fine.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that.
But this guy, I was interested in what he did in his nonprofit, in his civilian job.
Well, right, but and what I'm saying is, like, during that 6 month time, you can maintain that connection,
Right.
or that dialogue between that individual with professional communication, and then once the 6 months passes,
Right.
then you can, if you wanted to, take it outside of a professional environment, you could.
Right.
But it is a tricky one.
It is
a tricky one, and that's what I was kind of going back to with, you really have to kind of toe that line a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise it just becomes like a drone factory, and you're just putting out a product. But
yeah, I was thinking that same thing, that while on the one hand, we talked about having a system and maintaining, you know, you got a new airman and you do the same thing and you move them along. It's almost a relief every once in a while when you do have that one airman, you know, and you're like, oh, I like, you know, because it relieves your monotony. And I look forward to that, actually, sometimes.
Oh, very
To
much.
having that,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, there's definitely a boost in, you know, morale and stuff whenever you get that one airman that just it clicks and they get it, and you know they're saying the things that tells you, hey, this person has, you know, they bought into it. They're dedicated.
Right.
They want to be the best. Versus the ones that just come here to get through, and you know that's all they're looking to do.
Right. One thing I've noticed about these airmen, especially because I'm old enough now, I have children older than them.
Yeah.
And because I know like where I mean I understand their generation of like what they grew up and the things that they saw and you know like all their influences and all the kind of stuff that went into it. I get really frustrated when people talk about millennials and they always feel entitled and you know you have to do this and you have to do that because millennials are this and millennials are that. And I don't know if I'm biased because they're my children's generation, or if it's a genuine thing. But I have more faith in the future of the Air Force than I have in a long time because by and large, these are really really good people that are coming through. You know, and they're sincere and they're committed and they have
smart.
Yeah, they're bright.
Very smart.
They're bright and they're smart and they got good ideas. And I think that the more technology advances, the more opportunities they'll have to be able to use that and to be able to accomplish things that we can never do when we were airmen.
Yep. I agree. I don't buy into the whole, you know, millennial, you know, kind of cop out. That's the way I kind of look at it, is that because you really have to understand that, you know, when you say, oh, this is this generation, you know, well, this generation is a product that we created.
Yes.
This is our product.
Yeah, it's
so
true.
If you're going to blame anybody, you blame yourself.
It's true.
Because you've created this, so now you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not a bad thing. You know, it's I think this generation has developed into a much smarter, you know, generation than what, you know, I think I came from. You know, and I think that's just, you know, a product of advances in technology and capabilities.
Yeah.
But they're also a generation that's not afraid to ask why.
Right.
You know, which there is a time and place for it. It's just that you have to focus, get them focused, you know, in the direction that you want them to go. And that's the tough part, because sometimes they are so independent that you're like, you get that, well, this is stupid and I don't think we should really need to do it this way. But you're like, well, it's not about what you're doing, it's the fact that you're just doing it that matters.
In the past, I had another airman that worked for me, but she always needed to know why are we doing this and what's going on and why does this have to happen and blah blah blah. And sometimes I just needed her to just do it.
Sure.
So we came to an understanding where I said, hey, look, I know that you want to understand this kind of stuff, but when we come in at 7 o'clock in the morning and need to be ready to go, like out the door by 07:30 because we have to go survey this and accomplish this and like all these tasks. I just need you to do what I'm asking you to do. During the process of the day, if we have time, we'll talk about why. I will give you the time to ask the why questions and do all the explanations.
Right.
But for the time being, I need you to be where I told you to be and do what I told you to do. And she was able to accept that, you know?
Yeah,
and that helped her out a lot. You know?
Yeah, that's a great approach. You know, that's the one that I use.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have an issue with airmen asking me why.
No.
Because in
after
my mind,
they've already done what I told them to do.
I can justify why we are doing things this
Right.
way.
Right.
It's not something that's arbitrary.
Right.
Right. Yeah, but at the time, I may need you to just do it.
Right.
And then afterwards, I'll explain why.
Right.
Because I think it is important for airmen to know why they're doing things. You know, because if they understand the why, then I think they will be more efficient at it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's something I learned when I was in the CRG, because I worked directly with group level leadership, because it is a small group. So when you go to a staff meeting, you're in there with the group commander and you're in there with the wing commander, and you hear all of their discussions about what's going on, and you get a much more broad perspective on the moving parts that they have to move all in the same direction.
Yep.
And you may be way over there on this left wing thing, and it may not make much sense why the 2-star general is saying y'all need to do this.
Right.
But once I got that perspective and I understood that he's got like a huge gaggle of people who don't agree, but they all have to go in this direction, it's that much more important for this guy way over here in the left wing to just move.
Yep.
Just suspend whatever it is that I don't agree with, whatever it is that I don't understand, and just move forward. But the biggest thing that I got out of that, and one thing that I try to mentor a lot of the airmen and NCOs here too, is almost without fail, 99.9% of the time, you can trust your leadership.
Yeah.
You can trust, like I've had a lot of conversations with Major Wallace and with Colonel Allen, and I know Sergeant Rocky really well, and I know Sergeant Allen really well, and Sergeant Gibbs, and whenever an airman complains, or one of the instructor complains, or they worry, or like, is somebody out to get me, or what's going to happen, or what are they going to do, am I going to get in trouble, I can tell them with absolute confidence that every single person in their chain of command, all the way up to the Secretary of Defense, there may be like a couple of odd ones in there, but 99.9% of the time, they're going to seek out what is best for you. And seek out what's the best situation, what's the best thing to do, they're going to find a balance between what's the best interest of the Air Force and what's in the best interest of the individual. And very rarely in my career have I come across somebody in a leadership position who was actually vindictive.
Yep. I've seen different leadership styles. You know, I've gone through several commanders and ops officers and everything in my 15 years that I've been in. Different flight chiefs. And every one of them is going to be different. Their leadership style is different.
Right.
But ultimately, everybody's success is going to be based off of their performance. How well did your unit do? How well did your flight do?
Right.
And that's kind of how you're rated. Were you a good commander? Were you a good flight chief?
Right.
So in order for you to have that success, you've got to, number one, make sure that your people are taken care of. Because honestly, without the worker bees, nothing gets done. Right. And you can't be successful. So you got to take care of your people. And then you got to focus your efforts towards mission success, whatever that is. And so I don't think anybody's going to just, arbitrarily make these decisions just, because, without having some sort of, thought about it. And so I think ultimately you're right. You can trust your leadership, for the most part. Now, like I said, some people's leadership styles are different. So you may not necessarily agree with their leadership style, but I think ultimately they are looking at what's best for the mission.
And in what's best for the mission includes the individual airman.
Yes.
Because you are part of the mission.
Yep.
And I gotta make sure that all my ducks are in a row too. Or is there anything that you wish maybe we would have said, or something else that you want to talk to that fictitious technical sergeant about, or? Because I asked all the questions that I was most interested in.
Well, I'll tell you, maybe I'll see if I can get your perspective.
Sure.
So what, 20 years? Close?
23.
23 years.
Almost.
23 years of service. I have found that I think the hardest thing to do out there when it comes to mentoring is getting a change in culture. How do you change a culture?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. This has been my focus. The problem that I face here is that there is such a rotation of airmen that comes through here. So I can get buy-in from some airmen on it's cool, right? I'm just going to say it's cool to follow the rules. It's not cool to go out and break the rules and see what you can get away with, go drinking underage, whatever, right? I can get a buy-in from some airmen, and then how do I get that culture to change whenever you have that rotation?
I think that there's two different things. One is that you have to make sure that box that we maybe like bring the individual in, like airmen in, like we talked about.
Mhm.
You got to make that sure that that system is consistent. And I think that that's one of the things that Colonel Hostler is trying to do by cleaning up everybody's line.
Sure.
Because I've said this a million times, and I'll say it a million more times, that you're responsible for the words that you say.
Well, yeah.
Language has a tendency to define culture and define how you think about the world. So like, you know, if somebody walked into the room right now and was a native French speaker from France, they would have a completely different perspective on everything that's going on than we have as Western English speaking folks.
Okay.
You know, Americanized English folks. So I think that's one of the things that Colonel Hostler is trying to accomplish, is to change the culture by bringing the standard up to a more corporate, professional working environment, which is what we need to have. But having said that, you have to do the two things in tandem. You have to make sure that your system that you bring the individual airman into is functional and efficient. You got to make sure that that's working properly. But then you also have to make sure that the individuals operating the system are functional and efficient.
Right.
And so that's how you start with that culture. But it's just like anything else. I mean, if you've got, you know, if you're trying to make apple pie and you've got a rotten apple, you can have the best recipe in the world.
Sure.
But you throw a rotten apple in there, it's going to be a crappy apple pie.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
You know, and I think that we need to be more willing to let more airmen go.
So you're saying we need to get rid of more airmen. But my question is...
But because I try to be politically correct, I want to make it sound more friendly, but yeah.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, there's just issues with that. That's not as easy as it sounds.
The problem that I have is that, you know, I try to make that apple want to be an apple pie and not an apple tart or a turnover, right? That's the issue that I face, and that's probably one of my biggest struggles. Is I take this airman who comes in,
right,
and I've got all these airmen that are speaking all these different languages, you know, because they all have different backgrounds, different perspectives on things, and so I'm trying to be this multilingual person to take all these individuals and get them to speak Air Force and be Air Force.
Right.
And not only that, but then go out and communicate that to the rest of the other airmen and say, hey, this is how you should be. And that is the hardest thing to do, is to get them to want to go out and say, you know what, it's not cool to break the rules.
There's this one of my standard spiels that I give to the new airmen is I talk about Miller Cave. And how, I start out by asking them, who in here is a leader? And they're all just kind of, you know, cross their arms. Sure. They're not going to say anything. But then I say, oh, no, wait, what's that phrase in the Airman's Creed where you say, I am an American airman, wingman, leader, warrior? And then I ask them again, who in here is a leader? And everybody puts their hand up. I'm like, right, because you said the word, I am a leader, so now you're a leader. Yeah. And then I ask them, but I'm a master sergeant and you're an airman basic. Can you lead me ever? And of course the answer is no. And I say, let's think this through a little bit. And I'll say, you know, so let's say I come into work and I'm tired, I haven't been sleeping well, maybe I haven't been doing my PT, maybe my hair looks rough, like actually I need a haircut right now. But then I come up to Airman Rectory, or I think that's her name, and I was doing this class, and Airman Rectory was there, and she was just very composed. Like, you know, she had like earrings in, but they were just exactly according to the AFI, and her hair was right, and her glasses were right, and her uniform looked good, and she was just like very professional. Okay. And I said, if I come up to you in the hallway and then you address me and you give a reporting statement and you rank and, you know, and you do everything properly, I'm going to see you doing everything right. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to realize that I'm doing a lot of things wrong. Yeah. And I'm going to know just by you setting your example that I need to correct myself. And in that moment, just by you living by the standards, sure, you're leading a senior NCO to go be a better person, to go get his act back together. Right. You know? So I make sure to instill that. But then the other thing is that when I talk about wingmanship to the airmen, is I say, I'll talk about Miller Cave. And have you been out there?
I've actually never been to it.
Okay. So in Miller Cave, it's kind of a cool place. But if you go too close to the edge, there's a cliff that drops off, and there's a bunch of trees, and it slopes a little bit towards the cliff, and it's all covered with gravel.
Okay.
So if you go too close, you're gonna start to slide a little bit, and there's a risk. And there's no barrier or anything like that, and you can do it, but it's just a bad idea. And if you're very, very careful, you can be there for a while. But if you start horseplaying or roughing around, you're going over the edge.
Yeah.
And that's just the end of it. So when I talk about wingmanship, I say you wouldn't let a fellow airman get too close to the edge over there. Because you're a leader, we already established that you're a leader, regardless of what rank you are.
Yeah.
As a wingman, you have a responsibility to make sure that your fellow wingman isn't getting too close to that edge, because you know that they're going to fall over it.
Yeah.
And if you're on the team together, if that airman's dead over the edge of a cliff, you can't meet the mission anymore. So I try to instill those ideas into them from the beginning, and I think they get a lot of this during Airman Week at basic.
Yeah.
But then I get like wishy-washy feedback.
Yeah.
But, some of them are like, it was great, it was amazing, and then some of them are like, that was stupid, it was useless, and you get the full spectrum. But it seems to be that getting those two key concepts down, three key concepts. One is that, like you said earlier, like your integrity has to come first. If you look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and know that you did everything to the best of your ability, and identify the things that you didn't do, because we all have those too, but without beating yourself up about it and saying, oh yeah, I did kind of screw that up today, or I didn't maybe do as what I could, tomorrow or the next time I have the opportunity, I'm going to do better.
Right.
But then keep in mind that you're always a leader and somebody's always watching you, regardless of if you're a 4-star general or a brand new airman basic. Somebody's watching you, and somebody's making decisions about their life and what they're going to do based on how you're behaving in that moment. And then if you have those two things in line, and then you remember the wingmanship concept, and you hold other people accountable. In the interview I did with Captain Schmidt, we talked a lot about accountability.
Yeah.
And holding somebody else accountable, and what that means. You have to be able to hold your fellow airmen accountable. Yeah, I'll ask them. So, like, say Airman Smith is 21, and you've got Airman Jones, who's 18, and you've got Airman Harold, who's 19, right?
Yeah.
And Airman Smith is 21 and already an A1C, and Smith goes to Jones and says, "Hey, I know you're 21. Can you maybe score me, some honey whiskey for the weekend?" and you don't know, like I want to be able to trust that Airman Jones is going to do the right thing and say,
yeah,
you need to stop that conversation right now, because obviously you've lost your mind and you need to go check your integrity. But there may be a weak moment, so the third airman needs to be able to say, "Hey guys, no, we're not going to do that. This is a bad idea. Somebody's going to get in trouble. It's going to get out of control. You're breaking the law. Please stop having this conversation right now."
Yeah.
And regardless of what rank they are, you don't want to do that, because you don't want there to be repercussion.
Yeah.
And I have suffered repercussions for doing that kind of thing, for calling somebody out and saying this is inappropriate, and it backfired a little bit. That has happened. But then that goes back to,
yeah.
And you're making that face like you've seen that too.
Well, yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people don't say anything or don't get involved. But I think again, that comes back to, whenever you lay down at night, you have to ask yourself, did I do everything that I was supposed to do?
Right.
And if you sat there and watched this stuff happen,
right,
and did nothing about it, well, then by your inaction, you're condoning it.
Right.
And that's what I try to get these guys to understand.
Right.
Is that, yes, nobody wants to be the snitch.
Right.
Because the snitches, they get ostracized. People don't want to hang out with them because they're like, oh, you're going to tell on me. But
yeah,
if I can get the majority of the people, the majority of the airmen, to be the ones that are willing to say, that's wrong, and you need to stop, well, then that person's not alone. Because they've got all these other people that are going to back them up.
I think it's something else that we tend to do as humans that hurts us in the military, is we want to be part of a social group.
Sure.
And I've learned that as much as you and I are going to be friends and we're going to be great and maybe take a canoeing trip and, do this kind of cool stuff, 6 years from now, I probably will struggle to remember your name. And that's just realistic. And that's just realistic. I've had a lot of people that I was really, really good friends with, and then I see him on Facebook and I'm like, oh, I used to be totally cool with that guy. He was great.
Yep.
But you just lose touch with people and it just happens.
You do. Yeah, I mean, that's the military.
But the tendency as humans is, like, I want you to think I'm cool. Like, I want to have this kind of relationship with you, right? And that works great in a village where everybody lives for their whole life.
Right.
And that's what we do by default as humans. But it doesn't work so good when you're in the military and you're in an area where the priority is the mission and the priority is to make sure that we're maintaining this kind of discipline.
Right.
And I have to be able to say, dude, Jared, you're screwing up, man. You need to you need to stop doing that and not worry about being cool, because the reality is that 6 years from now, I'm going to struggle to remember your name.
Yep.
Maybe now that I said that, we're probably going to be like bros forever. But but the thing is like, but you have, especially with the airmen too.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important idea for the airmen to understand. Like I still remember my friends that I made in basic training. I haven't been in touch with them for years, but I remember their face. I remember what they did. I remember stories.
Yep.
And that was a significant thing. And the people that I went through tech school with, because you're in that boiler, you're in that pressure cooker, and you remember those people.
Yeah.
But as soon as I left tech school, gone. Never saw them again.
I have one.
Yeah.
I stay in contact with one.
Right.
It's
right.
As a matter of fact, he's not even in the Air Force anymore.
Really?
But yeah, we stayed in contact through Facebook. But that was it. One.
Right. Yeah.
Out of my whole flight.
So, given that perspective now, though, are there times when you wish you would have said, Jimmy, you need to stop doing it?
Oh yeah.
Or Jimmy or Joe, that was stupid. The standard is you do this and that, so we need to maintain that standard.
And not only that, but I'll tell you, I'll go one step further. There have been times whenever I wish someone had come up to me and said, "That's stupid.
Yeah,
you're making a huge mistake there."
And that's the irony, is that you wish that you would have done it, and you wish somebody would have done it for you, and yet everybody's afraid to do it.
Right.
Right. So one of the things that I've found is that my relationships with some of the people even in this unit have gotten better because I realize that I'm not always going to be friends with them, and I can just call them out on stuff right away.
Yeah.
Like I can say, hey, Dan, you're doing this. You're doing it again.
Yep.
You're doing it again. And no, but see, the weird thing about that though is that like that's what you would do with your brother. So the irony is that so it's somebody that you're not gonna see ever again, so you want them to be cool and accept you, so you kind of stand off a little bit and put on this act.
Yeah.
When the reality is that you need to remember that these all come from your similar background, and we need to treat each other like we would brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Right? And have that same level of accountability, and standards.
Oh,
and this goes back to, this is another thing that I bring up with the airmen too, is I say straight up to them, depending, I'll read the room first, obviously, but I'll say, so since we all know that we come from similar socioeconomic backgrounds, and we all joined the Air Force for similar reasons, and now in a way we are siblings within this family, are you going to go sexually harass your sister?
Well, yeah.
Right? And they're like, oh, yeah, let that one sink in a little bit, buddy.
Yeah.
Are you gonna make sexually explicit comments about your brother? Are you gonna how are you gonna treat these people? Are you gonna let somebody else do that? Are you gonna see somebody in the Marine Corps, sexually harassing your sister, or making comments, or coming up with plans, or who's those clowns that some dude was licking the window and remember that whole deal? And you wouldn't let that happen if you knew that was your sister or your cousin. Yeah. Or your aunt, you'd put a stop to that immediately.
Sure.
And so I think that's the thing to answer your earlier question, how do you change that culture? Yeah, it's about finding that balance. It's about finding that balance between professionalism and, you know what it is? This is what it is. you got to be able to act like a mom or a dad.
Yep.
You know, of more of a large family of children, because you have to, they have to maintain their standards. You have to treat them all equally, wherever they are. You have a 14-year-old and an infant, so you have to give them what they need individually, but they'll still maintain like the family structure and hold them accountable immediately for whatever it is that they do wrong. But then also reward them immediately for whatever they do right.
Yeah, you do.
You know, that's the one thing that I don't do that very well.
It's just, for me, it's just I try to get them to take ownership. That's whatever, and I could really put that towards anything. How, does your dorm room, look like crap? Because if it does, that's a reflection of you. This is your house.
Right.
Is this how you would keep it?
Right.
If this was your apartment back home, or your room at mom and dad's house, are you going to keep it this way?
And if the answer is yes, then maybe you've got some self-respect issues. Yeah. I said that to an airman this week when I was doing NCOD, and the plate was just, and there was just like piles of trash, clothes everywhere. It smells bad, and there's just all kinds. Yeah. And most of the rooms that you go into, they may look a little messy because they're sleeping.
Well, they look lived in.
They look lived in
versus
trash. Yeah, and so I woke them up. I was in there, and I'm like, no, this is too far. You guys, this is disgusting. You got open food containers on top of the fridge. That's just gross. And if you maintain this, you're gonna have cockroaches in here. Yep. And I said, what this room tells me, the way that this room is right now, is that you don't have self-respect. Yeah. So maybe that's something that you guys need to work. And that was all I said now. And I don't even know. I didn't pull a 341. I didn't get their names. Nothing. I was like, yeah. Well, but again, that was me. I've done NCOD so many times on night shift that maybe it would have been better to pull a 341. Or maybe it would have been better to get their name. Maybe it would have been better. But like we said earlier, you get here so long, and it just turns into this sea of faces. That it's just another, like, I've had that conversation before. Sure. And I've gotten good at having that conversation. Yeah. When you're doing it and you're like, okay. But then did I don't know. I mean, what was it effective? I mean, who's gonna know? Who's gonna know? Yeah,
it's all trial and error, Yeah. That conversation may have motivated, I mean, they may have been so embarrassed by what you said that now from this point on, they're going to be like, man, I'm going to keep my room clean because I'll never know when Master Sergeant Hillerson or, Master Sergeant Gibbs or whoever's going to walk in here, and I don't want them to think that I'm just this piece of trash. Right. Yeah. And it may work for some, but then others it doesn't. No. And you can't save them all. You can't. No. That's impossible. And you have to be willing to let go of the ones that you can't save, I guess.
Is it better to say you can't save any of them, but you can show them all how to save themselves?
Yeah, I believe so.
Is that better?
Yeah, you can give them the tools to be successful. It's just whether or not they'll use them.
Yeah, because they're all adults.
That's true.
There's nobody here who's not legally an adult.
Yeah. You're right. That is the better term is, you can't personally save them because you can, as the old saying goes, lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Right. So if the horse won't drink, you get a new horse, I guess.
Or like the whole teach a man to fish thing.
Right, exactly.
Give them a fish or teach them to fish. Which one's better? And I think part of our job here is to teach these people how to fish. Yes. I think it's a good place to wrap it up.
I think so.
Yeah, I think we beat that horse to death.
We did.
How many more cliches you got?
We could keep going, but no, it was a good conversation, though.
Yeah, it was. All right. Well, thank you very much. It was a good talk, and hopefully other folks will benefit from this.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, I think they will. All right. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed that. Sorry it was so long. We actually talked for 2 hours, even though we only scheduled for 1 hour. I had to do a lot of editing just to get it as short as it is. But with a subject like this, we could probably go on for days and never really get to the bottom of it. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to talk to Master Sergeant Keller or me, and definitely your peers. Share it around, come back and revisit it, and look for ways to apply anything you might learn. And, as always, keep flying, keep fighting, and keep winning.